many of your interviews, you mentioned that you are not worried about like Terminator outcome, but the risk of superintelligence, and if it's superintelligent, it's like smarter than all humans combined. It will definitely find the way out. Probably will have its agency and its will, its objectives. So my question is, like, why don't you consider it as a real risk for humanity?
So it's certainly a risk. I guess what I was saying is one, I think things have certainly shifted over time. If you go back 4 or 5 years, every time there was an article that said AI, there was a picture of the Terminator robots with the red eyes, right? And now we have less of that. And I guess what I was trying to say is more worried about people using technology for bad things than I am for technology going awry. But I recognize that technology can go awry and does. So in some sense, we've already been conquered by a super technology, right? So if you look down from space, you could say, well, the dominant species on Earth is the car. And we've dedicated 2/3 of our cities to them, and then they've enslaved these humans to drive them around, but only recently they start driving around on their own. Sometimes, you can have unintended side effects of technology. So I'm certainly worried about that. I guess the other thing is, I think we fetishize intelligence too much, right? And we call ourselves Homo sapiens, so we think intelligence is the most important thing. If elephants could think about it, they'd probably say, well, super strength is the most important thing. And cheetahs would say super speed is the most important thing. And so intelligence is just one aspect, and it can do certain things, but there's other things it can't do. And if intelligence was the only thing that mattered, then the smartest people would be in charge of the world. And I don't think that's the world we live in. I think there are limits for some reason. Some things, just it feels like being smarter isn't going to help, right? So yes, if I wanted to play chess better, then having a smarter algorithm or having a faster GPU, that's definitely going to help. If I wanted to solve the Middle East crisis and I had a computer that could go 10 times faster, I think it's just going to get frustrated 10 times faster. It's not going to come up with the answer, especially because mostly where these machines get their intelligence is from training on stuff that we did.
Yeah,
so there's some kind of ceiling. Now, certainly they can go beyond that because they can put together things that we didn't think of, they can think faster and so on, so that's not an absolute ceiling. You look at these Kurzweil graphs that all go up like this, and I kind of feel like it's more going to be asymptoting rather than...
In terms of development of AI?
Yeah. Right, I think we're going to start hitting.
It's interesting because recently there's a research company like METR. They released, I don't know if you've seen their research. Basically, they're claiming that agents can conduct the task much longer, and it increases every 7 months.
Yeah.
So basically, they show the trajectory that actually it accelerates its development, right, and ability to conduct long-term tasks. So I'm just wondering.
Yeah, so there's lots of measures that you can do better on, and one of my rules is every time there's a new system, they're going to have a metric on which they show progress, because there's so many metrics, you can always come up with one.
If you want to support your bias, you will find the ways how to support your bias.
Yeah.
This is what it is.
Yeah, partly that, and partly also just if you want to train on something, you're probably going to be successful on that. But it doesn't mean you're going to be successful on everything.
When do you think we will hit that ceiling with AI?
You'll keep going, and so another way to look at a Kurzweil graph is the exponential looks like it's going up and up, but if you plot it on log paper, it's just a straight line, right? And I think we feel these growths more like that, right? So we've already gone through these amazing things even before AI. I mean, look at all the stuff that's in here that everybody carries around with them, and if we had that all of a sudden. If you went from 100 years ago to today, people would just be blown away. But instead, we just say, nah, this is just normal. We just get used to it. I think it's going to be a gradual, we get used to it, and there'll be more powerful stuff. But I don't think there'll be one moment when we say, aha, now we've achieved the final goal.
But with ChatGPT, it felt like that, even though like the inner circle knew what they're working on, right? But like for mainstream people, it felt like, oh, now this AI can do
true,
like
right?
so crazy many things,
and
right?
so maybe I'm biased, right? Because I sort of saw it year by year saying, oh, it's getting a little bit better. But to the public who wasn't playing with that, and then all of a sudden they were, yeah, that was a change. But then you just get used to it.
You think that superintelligence might happen, right? So it's not...
I think it's easy to be, choose any task and we can be better at humans than that, right? So we have a history going back in the 1990s. All of a sudden, we had super chess players, and that was surprising to some people. And then we've gone on, and we'll keep doing that. I guess what I'm saying is that they'll be, in some sense, grounded on the experience they have in the world, and most of that experience comes from us. So I don't think it'll be completely foreign to what we can understand.
Researchers in frontier AI labs, they're saying, like, okay, we expect AGI by 2028, latest by 2030. It seems like 2030 is like, that deadline by which we need to achieve AGI. So what is your estimate about AGI?
So it all depends on what you define it as, right? How A does it have to be, how G does it have to be, and how I does it have to be. So Blaise Aguirre and I wrote this paper last year, I guess, and we said AGI is already here. And so what do we mean by that? Well, we said, no, of course, we can't deny that these systems make lots of mistakes, and there's, they make terrible errors and hallucinations and false citations and have all these flaws. We thought that the important thing is that now, in the last 3 years, for the first time ever, the software industry has changed to the point where we're building software that's general rather than specific. And that's new. So one of the analogies was you go back to 1945, we had the ENIAC computer, and it was the size of this room, and it was extremely slow, and it had tiny, tiny memory, but it was 100% general from what we know today, because it was programmable, and it had a branching statement, and an if statement, and a looping statement, and so, you mathematically prove that if it wasn't limited by memory and speed, it could do anything that any computer can. And since then, it's just been sort of incremental improvements on the computer. And so I think we've passed this generality point where we're starting to build software that's general, where we don't decide ahead of time, this is going to be accounting software for a bank, this is going to be a language generator, this is going to be an image recognizer. We just built these foundation models, and then you can do anything with them. So to me, generality is here, and then it's just a question of where do you put the goalposts? How high do you have to be? And you can arbitrarily say this is AGI, but I'm just not that interested in playing that.
Most definitions that I've seen is that AI is capable of doing work of knowledge workers. We can replace them and basically produce economically valuable tasks. So companies, they don't need humans, and they will replace them with AI. And this is basically AGI that basically shifts the economy. Do you think this will be
so I think
by 2030?
we're seeing small shifts. We'll see bigger shifts. I don't think it'll be a huge shift by 2030. I'm also not interested in replacing people for most uses. There's some places where that would be a good idea. Most places, I'd rather augment people. I don't think we need new people. We know how to do that the old-fashioned way. My wife and I did it twice. She did more work than I did, and the output was great, and I'm very proud of that. And I think that's what we should do. We should make people better. Yes, that will mean, in some sense, there'll be fewer jobs, right? So a company will be able to do more with fewer people because the people plus the AI can work together and do better things. But in other ways, there'll be more jobs because it'll be easy to create something that we've never seen before.
So you don't think that there will be like a crisis and people will be losing jobs and will not be able to find anything?
So I think it's a problem because of the speed and because of sort of resistance to change, right? So we've had these kinds of disruptions in the past. It used to be something like 90% of people in America were farmers, and now it's down to 2% or something. I was a farmer, my parents and grandparents were farmers, but now these kids, they went off to university and they're going to go work in an office building instead of work on the farm. So it was generational, but now it's like, I had a job for 2 years and then that got automated. Then I had to find another job, and I had that for 1 year, and then that got automated. Then I had another job, and that only lasted 6 months, and now I'm kind of pissed. And I don't know, I want to do something about that. So yeah, I think that's going to be a societal problem, that kind of disruption. But I guess another thing I want to say is it takes time because the technology can be there, but the widespread use of the technology takes longer. Analogy I like is to look back at the introduction of electricity into factories, right? So it used to be factories had a steam engine in the middle, and then there were all these conduits and so on pushing steam out to different machines, and it was very inefficient. And they said, great, we can throw away that steam engine and replace it with the electric motor. They just put the electric generator in the middle, and they still had all the conduits, and but now some of them were wires instead of steam ducts. And that didn't make things very much more efficient. And it took a while to say, oh, that was a mistake, to say, we're just going to replace one central machine with another one. Instead, what we need to do is put an electric motor in every machine spread throughout the factory and completely rethink how we do things. Having the technology is one thing, but figuring out how it gets integrated into all of society, I think that's harder.
And people probably will be sabotaging. I mean, there are like cases, especially like scientists or people who experts in their field. They think that AI might not help them. They trust themselves and their expertise more than AI, and there's a sabotage happening. So I expect something like that also will be. To the next question, it's actually related to what we're like basically how you see AI will be changing the economy and like how people should prepare themselves for this change, especially like knowledge workers who probably will be losing their jobs. I don't know to which scale it will be happening, but it will happen, right? Like what they should start doing right now, think about what skills they should acquire to prepare for that future.
I think just start using these tools. And I've seen lots of examples of that. It's a friend who's a biologist, and he says, I'm not a programmer. I've got my biology PhD, and I know some technical stuff, and I can take my data out of a spreadsheet and make a plot and insert that plot into my publication and send it off. He said, but I always wanted to have an app that would really track these bird migrations on a map. And I knew a real programmer could do it, but I never thought I could do it. And then I heard about Copilot, and I started playing with it, and I built the app, right? And so I think just having that willingness to say, there are these things that used to be outside of what I could do, but they're now accessible to me. And you just have to have the willingness to take a chance and expand out from your comfort zone and say, I'm going to use this. So another example is there's an internal app at Google, and sort of a specialized things, and people that use it every day love it, and it's complicated, and it's got 20 different menus on top with 100 different buttons. They learn to use it and they like it. But then like a manager wants to take a look once a year and says, I don't want to learn this app, so I'll go ask the engineer, show me these things. Now show me what's this, show me what's that. And they have to sit down together and do it. So we put in a little LLM box. And now the manager just types into the box and says, I don't need the engineer anymore. I can drive it myself. I didn't want to learn all the buttons, but I know what I want to ask, and it just works. So I think that's a big change. And I think that'll be especially true for smaller companies. If you're a big company, you got your own IT team, and if it's something important, they can build it for you. And if you're a medium company, you hire Salesforce or somebody, and you have enough money to pay them.
Salesforce is painful, to be honest.
But if you have enough money, you deal with it, and they build it for you. If you're a small company, there's really nothing you could do, right? But now, a small company, it's got, 2 salespeople, and they sit down and say, here's our workflow, and they build an app custom for them that's just right. And I think that's going to make a big difference.
Yeah, but if like company has like, let's say, a team of 20 salespeople, and then because of AI, it just needs like 2 salespeople, what the rest 18 should do?
So I think there'll be some of that, and then there'll be some of, well, we can be so much more efficient now, you know, each salesperson will have a different area of the world. We'll be selling more than we did before. So I think it'll be a mix of some sales loss and some expansion of capabilities.
If you remember last year, this debate around the bill, SB 1047, it's actually like two camps, right? Like one camp, like a doomers, okay, we need to regulate AI because there are like lots of harmful knowledge. It could be used by bad actors, and there's, you know, we need to accelerate AI because of China and so on and so forth. First of all, I'm curious, to which camp do you belong? And if there is a positive scenario, like wonderful, but in case like the doom scenario happens, what do you think, what we can do today as a community to minimize those risks?
So I think a lot of what SB 1047 was aimed at is obsolete. So last year, right? So it was saying if all the action is going to be in these powerful foundation models run by a few large companies, then how do we regulate those companies? And yeah, that's something you want to look at. But now we're in a world where anybody can build their own model for...
Because of open source models?
Because of these open source models, and because these distilled models are, you know, almost as good for a small fraction of the cost. So the cat's really out of the bag. And I think that changes all the perspective. So I remember I was at a meeting 2 years ago, maybe it was only 1 year ago. Things go so fast, right? It's hard to remember. But anyway, so Eric Schmidt was there, and he was saying, oh, we can't open source models because of this threat, that bad guys will get a hold of it and they'll do terrible things. We got to lock everything up. So if somebody's asking, how do I make a pathogen that will kill 1 billion people? We want that to be logged, and we want to be able to do something about it. Just this past month, Eric said, well, we should open source more. Right?
Okay.
Right? Because he says it's too late. We can't stop that. And so we should open source so that there's more competition and we sort of grow the field faster. And I think this is, you know, this is always going to be a problem, that legislatures are designed to do certain things, but they aren't designed for the speed at which AI moves. Right? They're just kind of too slow to deal with that. You know, they're good for deciding how fast you should be able to go on roads and things like that, but they're not good at dealing with AI. So I think they have some role, and yeah, there should be some things that are legal and illegal, but I don't want to leave it up just to the legislature, right? So I want sort of bring every facet to bear. So part of that is self-regulation, and we've seen a lot of that.
What do you mean self-regulation?
So all the big companies,
themselves?
they have their AI principles, they have the internal training that everybody's got to go through, they've got these review boards, both internal and external. And to me, you know, talking to my peers at Anthropic and Microsoft and OpenAI and so on, it's a big deal, right? So this is crucially important to them, and they take it very seriously. Now, there may be some startups that are less serious about that, saying, you know, we've only got a small number of people, that's not going to be our #1 focus. But for the big companies, I think that's really important, and I think they do a good job. So that's part of it. So I recently joined an AI safety board that was put up by Underwriters Laboratory. And I joined it because I thought they're a really interesting organization. So they're a nonprofit, non-governmental, third-party, independent,
unbiased
certifier, right? And the last time there was a scare where the public thought there's a technology that's going to kill me, it was 100 and something years ago, and it was electricity, right? And people were worried about that. And so Underwriters Laboratory came along and said, we're going to put this sticker on your toaster, and it means it's not going to kill you. And consumers trusted that mark, and because they trusted it, companies voluntarily submitted themselves to the certification. And I think that was helpful. And so I think we should have some of that.
Those independent organizations, right?
And then I think there's also a possibility for professional organizations to step up. I'm a member of ACM and AAAI, and they have AI principles that I'm somehow bound by, but I don't feel very bound by that. Right?
Okay.
Right? I don't feel like my membership in those organizations is a big part of my identity. It's just like, oh, when I go to the conference, I pay a few dollars less because I'm a member, right? And that's about it. But it could be more than that, right? And in other fields, it is, right? So, I get to call myself a software engineer, but I don't have anything official. Anybody can call themselves a software engineer. In other fields, it's not like that, right? I can't go out tomorrow and say, you know what? I'm a civil engineer. Let me build a bridge. I'm not allowed to do that, right? I have to be.
There's protocol, right?
I have to be certified to do that, and I don't want every software engineer to have to go through certification because that would definitely slow things down. But maybe for some of these critical AI things, maybe there could be more involvement in certification of some kind.
And talking about acceleration of AI, and because of DeepSeek, like really, I think changed the game and like mindset, right? I'm just wondering, what is your take on the U.S. and China AI arms race? Who is leading? Like, what potentially this can result?
So again, I guess it depends on how much of an insider you are. So yes, so to the general public, it seemed like this was a big deal that they changed things. To me, and I think to people at OpenAI and Microsoft and these companies, they say, what's the big deal? We're doing that too, right? It's like, we have our big model that we exposed to the public, and that was expensive, and we paid a lot of money to build that because we amortized it over billions of customers, so we thought that was worth it. But internally, we got half a dozen research teams, and they all have a small budget. And we're not publishing anything, but they're all building models that are just as good and as cheap or cheaper
so basically,
to produce.
Public doesn't have access to some work that is actually happening.
So there's this research work that's done, the same kind of cost reduction, size reduction, and so on. All the big companies have lots of models like that. It's just that they aren't talking about them because they're focusing on their flagship models. Yeah. So to me, it wasn't a big deal. It was sort of inevitable that was going to happen, and lots of people can do it in the U.S. People can do it in China as well because they're fast followers and they do a good job of that. And one thing I think, maybe this is good. So people talking about it being like a Sputnik moment, and that may be good for the industry here in the U.S. and maybe also in Europe, because I think China really leads there, right? So if you're a startup company in China, it's easier to get access to the computing power you need than it is here.
Who is leading now? Or it's like neck to neck? What would your estimate?
No, so the U.S. is doing better. It has more top players, more top researchers, and so on. But China is good as well. And to some extent, there's multiple different games, right? So who's the top researcher? Who's going to have the next big idea is one thing. But can you be a fast follower and quickly implement something is another.
What do you think, besides open source, are there like other ways to make sure that it's equally distributed and benefits people, and not just like few people will be trillionaires and others, will be somewhere?
So I definitely worry about that, right? Yeah. And we started off. First question was, do you worry about Terminators? And so I guess my two biggest worries are one, evil people using powerful things for their purposes, and secondly, this idea of inequality. Mm-hmm. I don't think it's specifically AI. I think it has more to do just with software, right? So software has the marginal cost of goods is near zero, and the marketplaces are global. And so, in the old days, if we were both farmers and you were twice as good as me, you'd probably make twice as much money as me, and we'd both be okay. But if we're both app makers and you make an app that's twice as good as me, then you make twice as much. And if you're the best in the world, you have access to the whole world, and I get nothing. There are going to be a small number of really big winners. And that is going to be an issue. And I think, I'm not sure how much AI makes that worse than just the software, inherent parts of the software market in general. But I guess AI, allows you to go faster. So maybe it will accelerate that.
I think Sam Altman said that we will see, solo founders, basically like billion-dollar companies with solo founder. Do you think this is like really that this something like that can happen?
I think it's dumb to be solo, right? But I think it's true that you could have a 10-person company out-competing a 100-person company, right? And out-competing established companies that have sort of unlimited resources, but are bound by their own inertia.
Actually, a good example, like WhatsApp, right? I think they had like 17 people when they got acquired for 17 billion or something, right? Right. Great example.
So 17 people is a good number. If you only have one, it just seems like you're unnecessarily restraining yourself, because you got to sleep, and it's helpful to be able to talk to somebody. So I wouldn't recommend anybody try to go it with a single person. And the other part is, you want to be able to, if you can't convince a couple people to sign up with you, maybe you didn't have that good of an idea.
Another question that you also, somewhat covered in your previous interviews about using AI for misinformation, right? And also what I noticed that people have this tendency to heavily rely on LLM, and AI native people, like next generations, people even won't question the output of AI. So, like, any ideas how minimize the risks of misinformation and basically manipulating people's ideas, like using AI?
So I think there's at least two different parts of this. So first is you type something into an LLM and it says something and it's wrong, and you don't bother. And I think we've always had that. People are not careful about their sources. I think we can do a much better job of that, and you see. Perplexity makes a big deal of saying we're going to provide all the sources and so on. Of course, that only helps if you actually go and check the sources. But I think we could do better at making it easier for people to convince themselves and to convince them that this is reliable information. The second is some of the stuff these things are trained on is just wrong. Wrong because of error or wrong because intentional misinformation. And we have to learn how to protect from that. And that's a much harder problem. And so I remember in early 2001, I was at Google, and Al Gore joined the board. He thought he was going to have a different job for the next 4 years. It didn't quite work out for him. But he joined the board, and he gave this inspiring talk, and he said, you guys at Google, you're doing an amazing thing. You're providing access to all the world's information, and that's going to make the world a better place. And he never once said, maybe you should watch out for misinformation. And he was probably the most technically savvy politician
at that time.
Mm-hmm. Maybe Gingrich was kind of at the same level. But it just wasn't on their radar. And for us, internally, we had it on our radar, but not quite the same way, right? So we were very aware that webmasters were trying to spam us in order to get higher up in the ranking to make money. And so we were very aware of that kind of misinformation, but we weren't quite thinking yet of like political misinformation. And then that whole industry grew. And it's tough to deal with, right? So we still don't have something that you can, here's a sentence, is this true or not? We don't have a definitive way to do that.
Basically, on people, on their awareness, right? And desire to build like more comprehensive world model, right? Instead of relying on one source. In my opinion, at least, Google still has moat in search, even though, they're like Perplexity and ChatGPT and Claude now has search capabilities. But if I need, if I care about factuality, to be honest, I go to Google, and if I need like a specific source or a link. But what do you think, what will happen to Google, like let's say in 10 years from now? Do you think it will be able to maintain its monopoly?
I guess the first thing to say is, everybody thinks that Google is a search company, and they start out with search, and then they added, YouTube and ads and various other things. But if you go back to the very beginning, you know, they were a couple blocks from here in their small building, and before that, they were another half mile away in Gates Hall. When it was a university project, they didn't think about search. Rather, what happened was Larry and Sergey said, oh, there's this internet thing, and it seems to be growing really fast. And it seems like it's really interesting. And why don't we get a copy of the internet and see what we can do with it? So it was really an information company or a data company. And then once they figured out how to get enough computers and disks so that they could download a copy of all the important pages, and they started playing with it, and eventually they came up with the idea of, oh, what we're going to do with it is search. But I think that was kind of contingent, right? It could have been something else. It could have been some other way to make use of that information. And maybe from 10 years from now, you know, they'll probably still be doing search, but it could be something else that they're focused on. Don't think of search as being the 10 blue links. Think of it as Google provides access to information. If some of that is through links, if some of that is, you know, we're going to create a podcast for you, if some of it is we're going to make a movie for you, or we're going to have a conversation, that's still access to information.
Thomas, I was thinking, like, what could be like the ultimate search technology, and sort of the best what I could come up with is, like, if neural link technology is good enough, right? Like, then you can just like think about something and do search through your mind, and this is how you can find information you need. Thanks a lot. Thanks for your time, and yeah, we can wrap up official part.